There is a question that sits underneath everything in Adventure Time. It is not a question the show ever asks directly. It does not announce itself with dramatic music or a glowing title card. It just lives there, buried beneath all the candy kingdoms and vampire queens and talking dogs, patient and enormous, waiting for you to notice it. And the question is this: what was here before anything? Not before not before the Mushroom War, not before Earth or the solar system or the universe. Before any of that. Before the concept of before. Before time itself had the tools to organize events into a sequence. Before existence had decided what it was going to be. Most stories do not bother with that question. Most stories begin somewhere and leave the darkness outside the frame. But Adventure Time is not most stories. Adventure Time looks into that darkness and describes what it sees with complete, unsettling specificity. And what it sees out there in the nothing before the nothing is monsters. Before time began, before existence had differentiated itself from non-existence, before there was a universe to hold any of this, there was a sea. Not a sea of water, a sea of chaos, a thick, golden, roiling ocean of something that was neither alive nor dead because life and death had not been invented yet. And writhing through that sea, filling it, being it, were creatures. Enormous, ancient, alien things made of hunger and destruction, and a kind of primordial malice that predates the very concept of evil. Because evil requires a context. Evil requires there to be good things and bad things, and a difference between them. That these creatures existed before that distinction was available. They were not evil. They were something older than evil. Something for which we do not have a word. The show calls them the primordial monsters. In the episode Gold Stars, the Lich, that grand, terrible engine of annihilation, briefly seizes control of Sweet Pea's body, that innocent little child he has been forced to inhabit. And in that moment of forced possession, he turns to two bumbling minor villains who have been tormenting the child, and he makes them see. He shows them what he remembers. He forces into their minds the vision of that golden sea, that pre-existence chaos, those ancient creatures reaching and grasping and screaming with a hunger that the universe itself had not yet been born to satisfy. And the thing about that vision is that it is not a metaphor. It is a memory. The Lich was there, not as a later construct, not as a being who learned about this secondhand. He was there in some form before the universe decided to show up and impose order on everything. He remembers the sea of monsters the way you remember your childhood home, with a kind of deep, bone-level familiarity that does not require effort to access. This tells us something extraordinary about the structure of the Adventure Time universe. Its deepest antagonist is not a product of civilization gone wrong, or a magical experiment that backfired, or even a cosmic accident. The Lich is older than causality. He existed before the conditions that would allow for his existence were in place. He is a paradox wearing a skeleton's face, and he has been waiting longer than time itself for his chance to fulfill his nature. But the primordial monsters, as a class of beings, are not well understood even within the show's own mythology. We know a handful of them. We know the Lich, or at least the being who would eventually become the Lich, though his exact relationship to primordial status has been genuinely debated by fans because the show is deliberately ambiguous about it. We know Orgolorg, the Breaker of Worlds, who in the show's current timeline is compressed by Earth's gravity into the shape of a small, ungainly penguin named Gunter, who follows Ice King around. We know Kokon Tepe, the source of all magic, who appears in the Fiona and Cake series as a creature encountered in the extinct world, ancient and exhausted and deeply unsettled by the question of whether life is worth preserving. What unites them is their relationship to time and existence. They do not age, they cannot die in any conventional sense. They were born before the concepts of aging and dying existed, and those concepts cannot fully claim them. The universe has tried to contain several of them with varying success. Abraham Lincoln, the King of Mars, dispatched one of his most powerful servants to deal with Orgolorg. The result was that Orgolorg fell back through time and was compressed by Earth's gravity. Contained? Arguably. Defeated? Not even close. That compression is a temporary inconvenience to a being who existed before time had a direction, and the universe keeps trying. The Citadel, that crystalline prison floating in the multiverse, was built specifically to hold beings who have committed what the show calls cosmic crimes. It is implied, though not stated outright, that many of the ancient prisoners in the Citadel are exactly these kinds of primordial entities, captured during some forgotten war in the deep past of existence, before human civilization had even begun to daydream. The primordial war theory, which is not something the show ever confirms but which emerges naturally from the evidence, goes something like this. When the universe first came into existence and time began to flow, and the concepts of life and death and order and chaos started to differentiate themselves from the primordial soup, new cosmic entities emerged from that differentiation. Death, life, the cosmic owl, Prismo. These are beings of the new order, beings whose nature is defined by the rules of the universe that now exists, and they came into conflict with the primordials, those creatures from before, but who did not share the new order's values and had no interest in the universe's tidy organizational schemes. The war, if it happened, explains why there are so few primordials left. Why Orgalorg, who was once described as enslaving whole galaxies, is now a penguin. Why the monsters from the sea exist only in the deepest, darkest corners of the multiverse. They were fought. They were contained. They were, for the most part, dealt with. But not all of them. The Lich was never contained. Not really. He keeps coming back. Every time something defeats him, every time he is transformed or imprisoned or stripped of a body, he finds another way. This persistence is not stubbornness. It is ontology. He cannot stop because stopping is not something a being from before the universe can do. The drive to eliminate all life is not a choice he makes. Now, it is what he is, the way a flame is hot. And above all of them, threading through the very fabric of everything like a dark current Dlamad beneath every bright thing, is Golb. Golb is the embodiment of chaos and discord. He is not a primordial monster exactly. He is something adjacent to them, something that may have emerged from that pre-existent soup differently than the others. He is the reason Magic Man lost his wife Margles, erasing her from every dimension simultaneously, which is something even Prismo, the near-omnipotent wishmaster at the center of time, cannot undo. Prismo's powers run up against Golb like water running up against a wall. The wish mechanism fails. The basketball hoop appears. Whatever Golb takes is gone. This makes Golb the closest thing Adventure Time has to an absolute, a limit on the power of all other things. And yet even Golb is not beyond reach. Not exactly. He is weakened by harmony, by beings acting in genuine concert, which is perhaps the show's deepest philosophical statement about the nature of chaos. You do not defeat chaos by overpowering it. You defeat it by refusing to be chaotic, by finding the thing that chaos fundamentally cannot be. That is the world before the world. Monsters in a golden sea, a universe deciding to exist, a war between the old order and the new, and one ancient embodiment of chaos still threading through everything, watching, waiting, reaching for the things it wants and leaving voids where they used to be. Everything else in Adventure Time happens downstream of this. Every kingdom, every hero, every tragedy and triumph, every wish and consequence. It all flows from that first, impossible, a violent moment when existence showed up and the monsters were still there. There is a detail in the cosmology that deserves a moment of careful attention before we move forward. The Adventure Time multiverse, as described in the Enchiridion and the series itself, is not simply a collection of parallel universes arranged side by side. It is layered, it has depth. The surface layer is the physical world, the one Finn and Jake navigate on their adventures, filled with candy kingdoms and ice palaces and mushroom-riddled plains. Below that surface is a second layer, the multiverse of alternate timelines, the different branches of history that split off every time a significant choice was made differently, or a wish was granted, or a bomb detonated in one place rather than another. Below that is a third layer, the realm of cosmic entities, death and life and the cosmic owl and Prismo and the beings who manage the underlying machinery of existence. And below that, or perhaps around all of it simultaneously, is the antiverse. The nothing, the void, the place from which even the primordial monsters came, and to which nothing has yet returned. This structure is what the show is mapping when it follows Finn and Jake into progressively weirder and more cosmically scaled adventures. Each time the narrative descends a layer, it finds something larger and stranger and more fundamental than what was above it. And each descent is also a discovery about meaning. The deeper you go, the more you find that the small things at the surface were always expressions of the enormous things at the bottom. The Candy People's lives are connected to the primordial's hunger. That Jake's friendship with Prismo is connected to the structure of time itself. Finn's choice to stay rather than transcend is connected to the mechanism by which the universe keeps renewing itself. Adventure Time knows Asha knows it is doing this. The show is not accidentally profound. Pendleton Ward and the writers who built this mythology were doing something intentional with the layers, drawing a deliberate map from the intimate to the cosmic and back again, insisting at every level that the distance between those two things is not as large as it appears. The primordial monsters are the show's reminder that the intimate and the cosmic have always been tangled. Orgalorg was once the breaker of worlds, enslaving galaxies, operating at a scale so enormous that individual lives did not register as meaningful distinctions. Now she is Gunter, a penguin, waddling after a lonely man in an ice palace, seeking attention, responding to affection. The scale has collapsed entirely. The cosmic horror is now a house pet, and yet the cosmic horror is still in there, compressed but not eliminated, waiting in the same way the Lich is always waiting in Sweet Pea's dreams. This is the thing the primordials teach. Scale is not permanent. Cosmic power can be reduced to a penguin by gravity. Ancient evil can be transformed into a baby by the blood of a citadel guardian. The things that seem most fixed and fundamental are the most susceptible to being changed by the right pressure in the right moment, which is either terrifying, depending on which direction the change is going, or the most hopeful thing imaginable. So settle in. Get comfortable. Let all the tension in your shoulders just drop away. Because we are going to walk through every layer of this multiverse together, one story at a time, and by the end you are going to understand something about Adventure Time that most people who watched it never fully assembled. You are going to see the whole shape of it, and it is enormous and ancient and strange, and underneath all of that, genuinely, unexpectedly beautiful. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment telling me what time it is and where you are watching from. I love knowing where in the world you all are when we do these together. And if you have not subscribed yet, now is a great moment to do it, because we have got a very long, very cozy journey ahead. Section 2. The Catalyst Comets and the Cycle of Change. Here is something that Adventure Time hides in plain sight for most of its run. Something that exists as background color in the early seasons and only gradually resolves into meaning. The universe does not leave change to chance. It manages it. Every 1,000 years or so, something comes. A comet blazing through space aimed directly at Earth, carrying something specific. Not destruction for its own sake, not random cosmic violence. Something intentional, something the universe needs to deliver. These are the catalyst comets, and understanding them is understanding what Finn actually is. The show builds to this slowly. In the very early episodes, Adventure Time looks like a straightforward fantasy adventure. A boy and his magical dog, fighting monsters, helping kingdoms, having fun. But the show is always doing something else underneath the adventure. It is building a mythology so layered and internally consistent that when it finally starts to reveal itself, usually around season 5 and 6, the weight of it is genuinely astonishing. The catalyst comets are the delivery mechanism for that mythology's biggest revelation. Every 1,000 years, one arrives. Each one is a different color. Each one embodies a different concept, a different essential force or quality that the universe has decided the world needs to receive. And each one, upon impact, releases that quality into the world by becoming something, by reincarnating. The first comet we know about was green. It struck the Earth approximately 65 million years ago during the Cretaceous period, when dinosaurs still ruled and the mammals that would eventually become humans were small, nervous, and largely nocturnal. while an ice elemental named Urgence Evergreen, one of the original four elementals of that era, became obsessed with the approaching comet and believed it would cause catastrophe. He built a crown, a magical instrument designed to grant the deepest wish of its wearer to stop it. His plan was simple in theory and catastrophic in practice. He incapacitated the other elementals who tried to warn him. He prepared to use the crown himself, and then, at the last moment, he was incapacitated, and his apprentice Gunther, a small dinosaur creature who adored him with uncritical devotion, put on the crown instead. The crown reads the deepest wish of its wearer. Gunther's deepest wish was to be exactly like his master. And so the crown transformed Gunther into what Gunther believed his master was. A cruel, ice-powered tyrant with a long beard and a compulsion to call every female creature princess. The Ice Crown was born in this moment. The shape of the Ice King was born in this moment. And the Green Comet was never stopped. That Green Comet, it was the Comet of the Lich. Not the Lich as he exists in the show's present day, flesh and bone animated by cosmic hatred. The Lich as a concept, as a cosmic force, the reincarnation of evil into a form the world could understand and eventually reckon with. That Green Comet hit, and the idea of the Lich was planted in the universe, waiting for the right conditions to fully germinate. Those conditions arrived approximately 65 million years later during the Great Mushroom War, when a specific mutagenic bomb detonated and the cosmic force that had been waiting found a human body, submerged in toxic waste in a reality already bent toward darkness. But we will get to that. The second comet we know about was yellow. It arrived and was intercepted by Orgolorg, the Breaker of Worlds, before it could do whatever it was meant to do. Orgolorg wanted its power for herself. Abraham Lincoln of Mars intervened. Grob Gob Glob Grod fought Orgolorg. Orgolorg fell. The yellow comet passed without being absorbed, and its meaning remained, perhaps, undelivered. Some fans theorize this comet was connected to Jake, given the yellow color, given that Jake is a being whose existence is genuinely unusual and whose nature is never fully explained in the main series. This is speculation, labeled clearly as such, but it is the kind of speculation the show actively invites. The third comet was blue, and the blue comet was Finn's. Not the Finn we spend the show following, not exactly, but an incarnation of Finn's cosmic essence, the thing that keeps coming back as Finn across different forms. In his vision in the episode The Vault, Finn sees fragments of his past lives, a tiny comet, a butterfly, the warrior woman Shoko, and a future shape that has not yet arrived. The blue comet struck the Earth after the Mushroom War in a world that desperately needed what it was carrying. The spirit of pure life, pure heroism, the embodiment of everything that stands against the Lich's drive toward extinction. That comet brought into the post-apocalyptic world the essence that would eventually become the boy in the white hat. The purple comet is the fourth, and it arrives during the show's timeline in the Season 6 finale, The Comet. It is different from the others, where the previous comets embodied qualities that the world needed to receive. The purple comet is something more advanced, more final. It offers not just a quality, but a choice. When Finn encounters it, inside Orgolorg's body in space after cutting her apart with his grass vine arm, the comet reveals its core, a hollow purple sphere with 3 sets of eyes, and it offers him transcendence. The chance to go beyond the flesh, beyond love and hate and friendship and isolation, beyond all the beautiful and terrible things that make up mortal experience. To become part of the beginning and the end simultaneously. And the comet gives him the longest list in the show's history of all the things he would leave behind. It lists feelings, events, specific memories as specific people. It is a list of everything that makes his life his life. And Finn, 17 years old and still carrying the weight of his father's abandonment and Flame Princess and the Lich and a dozen other things, says no. He wants to stay. He wants to be a person in this world with these people doing these things. His father Martin, who has spent the entire show being a spectacular and possibly unredeemable disappointment, takes the comet's offer instead. And he transcends, and he is gone, and the moment is somehow both devastating and exactly right. because Martin's entire life was always pointing somewhere else. He was never fully present for anything. Now he is not. What the Catalyst Comet system tells us about the universe of Adventure Time is profound. It suggests that the universe is not passive. It does not simply allow events to happen, it participates. It sends agents of change on a 1,000-year schedule. It manages the flow of essential qualities the world needs to have. Life, evil, change, transcendence. These are not accidents or byproducts. These are deliveries. The universe is, in some sense, tending to itself. And Finn is part of that tending. He is not just a boy who happens to be heroic. He is heroism made flesh. Heroism that has been arriving on this planet since before the dinosaurs died. Taking different forms, fighting different battles, always ultimately serving the same cosmic function. Being the thing that stands between the world and the forces that want to unmake it. This makes his relationship with the Lich something deeper than enemies. They are two sides of the same cosmic process. The comet that embodied evil and the comet that embodied life, reincarnated over and over, meeting in each new form. The purple comet says as much directly. I have embodied all that is good and evil, it tells Finn, and the screen shows him when it says good and shows the Lich when it says evil. They are expressions of the same cycling force. The universe's attempt to hold good and evil in balance, to keep the conversation going, to prevent either side from winning so completely that the other disappears. Because here is the frightening thing that the comet almost says but leaves just barely unspoken. If the Lich ever truly wins, if all life is extinguished, then the comet's cycle stops. The universe loses one of its essential conversations. That the cosmic back and forth between life and death, good and evil, change and stasis, ceases. And something about that feels like it might be worse than just extinction. It might be the universe forgetting how to talk to itself. There is one more thing worth knowing about the Catalyst Comet system, something the show plants and never fully explains. The comets do not always hit Earth. They do not always arrive in the correct timeline. In Farmworld, the alternate universe created by Finn's wish, a bluish comet is seen passing Earth after the mushroom bomb was stopped. Passing. Not hitting. What does it mean when the comet does not arrive? When the delivery does not get made? Adventure Time does not answer this question. It just leaves it there, visible to the careful viewer, a loose thread in the cosmic design. Perhaps in those timelines, now the qualities the comet would have brought are simply absent. Perhaps the world goes on without them. Perhaps it does not go on very long. Section 3. The Mushroom War. How magic came back. Before the Candy Kingdoms and the Lich and the magic and the wonder, there was a war. We know its name, the Great Mushroom War. We know its outcome, the near total annihilation of human civilization. We know one of its key weapons, the mushroom bomb, a device of extraordinary and terrible ingenuity, a weapon that was not content merely to kill, but that reached into the fabric of life itself and rewrote it. Beyond these facts, Adventure Time is deliberately, productively vague about the details. We do not know which nations fought. We do not know exactly what political or ideological divisions drove the world to this particular edge. We do not know the year, though the ruins suggest something close to our own era, our own world looked at through a smoky, distorted lens. What we do know is pieced together from ruins, from Simon Petrikov's video diary, from the scattered evidence of a civilization that built spectacular things and then chose to destroy them. The pre-war world was clearly our world, or something very close to it. Technology at approximately our level. Cities, cars, television, universities. Simon Petrikov was a professor of archaeology and antiquities at what appears to be a modern institution. He gave academic presentations. He had a fiancée. He drank coffee. He watched Cheers. He was, by all available evidence, a comfortable, intelligent, late 20th century human being living a late 20th century human life, with all the ordinary mundane blessings that implies. He also believed in magic, not as metaphor, not as religion, but as literal fact. He thought magical artifacts existed. He went on expeditions looking for them. His colleagues laughed at him. He laughed back, internally, and kept looking. He was the kind of person who understood that the absence of evidence in a world that actively mocks the inquiry is not the same as evidence of absence. And then he found the crown. He found it in Scandinavia, purchased from an old dock worker who seemed to understand what he was selling and was happy to let it go. Simon brought it home and put it on, laughing, trying to make Betty smile, and the crown immediately took him somewhere dark and strange. He blasted ice magic. He screamed things that did not make sense. He was not himself. And then it released him, and he was himself again, and Betty was frightened, and the world outside was beginning to come apart. But before we follow Simon into his long twilight, we need to understand what the war itself was doing to the world. Because the Mushroom War is not just backstory. It is the engine that powers the entire setting. It is the reason Ooh exists. It is the event that created all the conditions for everything we care about. The war, at its end, involved nuclear exchange. Cities were annihilated. The ruins of massive population centers can be seen throughout the show's landscape, half submerged in grass and candy and new growth, transformed by 1,000 years of mutation into something that resembles civilization only in the most archaeological sense. The weapons were not just nuclear. Among them was the mushroom bomb, a device that did something far more consequential than mere destruction. It released a mutagenic agent into the environment, something that entered the cells of surviving life and rewrote the rules. Humans who survived in scattered pockets began to change. Animals changed. Plants changed. The very soil changed. And most significantly, magic, which had been declining throughout the modern era as science and technology rose to prominence, came flooding back. The mushroom bomb cracked something open that rationalism had been quietly sealing for centuries, and through that crack poured everything that science had been explaining away. Candy people, rainicorns, sentient furniture, talking deer, a world made of dessert inhabited by beings made of dessert, presided over by a scientist queen who had grown herself from a small piece of bubblegum 1,000 years before. The Lich was also born in this moment. The bomb detonated and the mutagenic wave found a human body, and something ancient and cosmic recognized an opportunity, and the Lich came into being. Not as a primordial monster reasserting himself exactly, though the Lich's memories of the pre-existence void suggest some connection to that deeper nature. But as a being of this world, shaped by this world's violence, embodying this world's darkest impulse, the capacity for total, deliberate, self-directed annihilation. In the Farm World timeline, created by Finn's wish, the mushroom bomb does not detonate. Simon Petrikov uses the ice crown to freeze it, saving the immediate crisis at the cost of himself. And without the bomb, the Lich is never born. But magic never comes back either. Humans never mutate into candy people. Princess Bubblegum never exists. Ooh, as we know it, never comes to be. The world continues as a scarred, post-apocalyptic version of itself, slowly recovering, populated by survivors and their descendants, including a farmer named Finn, who never discovered he was a hero. It is a world without the Lich, yes, but it is also a world without Jake's stretch powers, without Marceline's vampiric immortality, without the dead worlds and the citadel and the cosmic entities and all the strange, beautiful, terrible machinery of the cosmos that was unlocked by magic returning to the world. The bomb that created the monster also created the world worth saving. Adventure Time holds this with characteristic stillness, never underlining it, just letting it sit there. The Mushroom War also created the conditions for something else, the survival of Marceline. Marceline Abadir is half human, half demon. Her mother Elise was human. Her father is Hunson Abadir, ruler of the Nightosphere, source of all evil, a primordial monster who fell in love. Hunson fell in love with a human woman, which is arguably the most transgressive thing he could have done given his cosmic role, and their daughter was born into a world that was already fragile and was about to shatter completely. Her mother died. The Mushroom War claimed her, as it claimed so many. Marceline survived, a small child in the rubble of civilization. alone except for a toy she named Hambo, and then not entirely alone because a man named Simon Petrikov found her wandering and decided she needed someone. But he became her guardian. He sang her the Cheers theme song to make her laugh. He fought off the mutant creatures that stalked the post-war landscape with ice magic that cost him a piece of himself every time he used it. He wrote her letters explaining what was happening to him, that he was losing himself, that the crown was taking him further away each time he put it on, that he was scared, that he loved her, that he was sorry. And eventually, because he was a good man who had been given an impossible situation and chose to err on the side of protecting a child rather than himself, he left. Because staying would have meant hurting her. Because the thing wearing his face was not him anymore. She remembered him. Through 1,000 years of vampiric immortality, through the rise and fall of kingdoms and the transformation of the world around her, she remembered the man who sang the Cheers theme and called her Marcy and was scared of what he was becoming and loved her anyway. This is what the Mushroom War costs. Not just cities, not just civilization. It costs the ordinary, irreplaceable texture of specific human lives. Simon and Marcy wandering through rubble looking for chicken soup. A letter written in a shaking hand to a child who might not survive to read it. A moment of warmth in a devastated landscape that lasted 1,000 years in the memory of the only person still alive to remember it. The war is over by the time the show begins, but its consequences are everywhere. In the Candy Kingdom built on what used to be a city, in the ruins visible through the windows of places that should be secure. In the Ice King's madness, in Marceline's careful, armored grief, in the fact that Finn is the last human on Earth and has no idea why. Everything grows from this wound. That is what Adventure Time is at its heart. A story about what grows from wounds. About how beauty and magic and friendship and heroism can emerge from the most terrible starting conditions. About how life, when given even the smallest crack in the rubble, insists on coming through. Section 4. Simon Petrikov and the Ice Crown. A love story buried in ice. There's a scene in the episode Holly Jolly Secrets where Finn and Jake watch a series of VHS tapes they have found in the Ice King's things. They expect secrets, possibly embarrassing ones. But what they find instead is a video diary of a man losing himself. Simon Petrikov, speaking directly to camera in a pre-war apartment, describing what the crown is doing to him with the precise, measured language of someone who is still, barely, a scientist trying to document a phenomenon. And then less precise, and then less measured. And then the tapes end, and Simon is gone, and the Ice King has been there for 1,000 years, alone in his ice palace, kidnapping princesses for reasons he cannot explain. Because the reason was encoded in a grief so deep, the madness covered it completely. He called Betty his princess, and then he forgot Betty. And the crown transformed that specific love into a general compulsion. An obsession without an object, a man wandering through eternity looking for something he can no longer name. Let's go back to the beginning. Simon Petrikov was, by all evidence, exactly the kind of person who deserves good things. He was intellectually curious in the genuine, joyful way, not for status or ambition, but because he found the world genuinely fascinating and wanted to understand it better. He was kind. He was committed. He was the sort of person who, when he met a young woman named Betty Groff at an academic presentation, because she reached for the same book he was reaching for, decided she was worth knowing and pursued that knowledge with the same dedication he brought to his archaeological work. Betty was his equal. That is not a small thing in any time period, and it was not a small thing in theirs. She was smart, precise, committed to her own work, and in love with a man who believed in things other people laughed at. They were denied this but in the old-fashioned sense, a match. And their engagement, their life together, existed in the brief window before the world decided it was done with stability. Simon bought the crown at a market in Scandinavia. He was there looking for artifacts. The dock worker who sold it to him seemed to know what it was, seemed almost relieved to be rid of it. Simon brought it home. He put it on to make Betty laugh. The crown reads the deepest wish. Simon's deepest wish in that moment was presumably something like the wish of any person in a loving relationship, for this good thing to continue. for himself and Betty to be okay, for the world to be okay. The crown cannot grant a wish like that with any subtlety. It grants the surface layer version, ice powers and immortality. You will survive, you will be protected. Wow, but the person you are will not survive the protection. Betty saw what happened when he put it on. She was scared. She left. She did not abandon him. She went to find help. She found the Enchiridion, the ancient hero's manual that is also a key to the multiverse, and she used it to travel forward in time to where Ice King lived. She wanted to fix him. She spent centuries of time trying to find a way to break the crown's curse, to restore Simon without destroying what the crown had made possible in the meantime, because the Ice King, for all his madness, was real. He had friends. He had Marceline. He had, in his strange, sad, delusional way, a life. She did not want to erase that. She just wanted Simon back. The tragedy is that the show's timeline moves faster than her ability to find a solution. In the series finale, come along with me. She finds a way. But the way is Golb. She harnesses the power of the embodiment of chaos and discord, the entity that took her timeline's equivalent of Margles and erased her from every dimension simultaneously. She uses that power to try to restore Simon, and it almost works, and then she is consumed. The chaos merges with her. She becomes Golb Betty, a fusion of human love and cosmic chaos, and in her last fully Betty moment, she uses the crown, the thing that destroyed Simon, to seal Golb and keep it sealed. She sacrifices herself to free the person she loved, and the cost is everything she was. Simon survives. He is himself again. He has no crown, no ice powers, no millennium of accumulated madness. He is a man in his 30s who went into a very bad situation and came out the other side, older in the soul, if not in the body, and the woman who loved him is now part of something he cannot reach. He grieves this in Fiona and Cake with a rawness that the original series could not quite achieve with the Ice King's protective buffering of madness. Simon Petrikov, restored and sane and alone, tries to contact Betty through Golb. He tries to summon her. He gets terrible at the ritual and accidentally pulls Fiona and Cake through from their unauthorized universe. He is messy and desperate and human in the way that watching someone grieve a complicated love is always human. You see the specific shape of his loss. You see that it is not just Betty he is mourning, but the version of himself that existed before the crown. The Simon who had a future that included her. The show handles this with characteristic Adventure Time care, which is to say it handles it the way real grief works, without clean resolution. Simon does not get Betty back. What he gets over the course of the Fauna and Cake series is something else. He gets to understand what happened. He gets to see that Betty's consciousness still exists inside Golb, that she made a choice and the choice was rooted in love and agency, not sacrifice as tragedy. He gets, slowly, to release the guilt of surviving. He gets to be part of a world again, to have connections, to be Simon Petrikov instead of just the man who used to be the Ice King. And the crown has its own sequel story. After Simon is freed from it, his penguin Gunter absorbs the crown and becomes the Ice Thing. The crown found a new host, as it always does, because the crown is not just a magical artifact. It is the echo of Urgence Evergreen's desperate, misguided attempt to stop a comet, compressed into an object and set loose in time. It carries the shape of the Ice King because that is what Gunther's wish made it make. And it will keep finding heads to be on and wishes to distort for as long as it exists because the crown is the original enchanted item of the Adventure Time universe, and it has never once done what anyone hoped. Except perhaps once. On a cold post-apocalyptic night, when a man who was losing himself put it on one more time and drove back the mutant horde that would have killed a small child named Marcy, and then walked away while he still could. In that moment, the crown did exactly what it was supposed to do. It granted the deepest wish of the wearer. And Simon's deepest wish by then was simply for her to live. Section 5. The Time Room and Prismo. A god who needed a friend. At the center of everything is a room. Not a grand room. Not a cathedral of cosmic power lined with marble and lit by divine light. A room that looks like a bachelor apartment from 1985. If that apartment existed outside of time and space and contained an infinite wall of screens showing every moment of every universe simultaneously. Beanbag chairs. A good jar of artisanal pickles. The comfortable, slightly cluttered aesthetic of someone who has been living in one place for a very long time and has stopped worrying about what visitors might think. This is the time room, and the being who lives here is Prismo. Prismo is the Wishmaster. That is his title, his function, his cosmic job description. Every being in the multiverse is entitled to one wish. Any wish. No limits on scope, no restrictions on impossibility. You wish for the extinction of all life, Prismo has to grant it. You wish for a really good sandwich, Prismo grants that too. The mechanism does not care about the stakes. A wish is a wish. But Prismo is not just a vending machine for desires. He is a person. And the person he is turns out to be one of the most quietly moving characters in the entire show, precisely because of the contrast between his power and his loneliness. Between his ability to reshape reality and his inability to reshape his own circumstances. Between the scale of what he can do and the smallness of what he actually wants. What he wants is company. The time room exists outside of time. This is not a poetic description, it is a literal fact of its physics. The room sits at the center of the multiverse, touching all timelines simultaneously, but belonging to none of them, which means that time as it functions, everywhere else does not function there. Prismo experiences a kind of eternal suspended present. He watches everything that has ever happened or will happen on his wall of screens. He processes wishes from beings across infinite realities. He maintains the artisanal pickle operation in the hidden depths of the room. He throws parties occasionally, inviting the cosmic owl and party god and death and other cosmic entities of his approximate social tier. And then the parties end and everyone goes home and Prismo is alone again with his infinite screens and his eternal now. This loneliness is made geometrically more complex by the fact of his nature. Prismo is the dream of an old man, a sleeping human body, tucked away in a small floating island just outside the time room, dreaming with a consistency and creativity that has somehow birthed an entire cosmic entity. When the old man is asleep, Prismo exists. When the old man is awake, Prismo ceases to exist. When the old man wakes up from his dream and then goes back to sleep, Prismo exists again, but approximately 1,000 years have passed. This means that Prismo's existence is fundamentally contingent. The most powerful wish-granting entity in the multiverse depends entirely on an old man staying asleep. The being who can reshape reality cannot change this fact about himself. He has tried to come to terms with it, or has at least constructed a life within it. He has made the time room his home. He has developed friendships with the cosmic entities who visit, and he has found meaning in his work, in the weight of being the mechanism through which desire becomes reality across infinite universes. And then Jake shows up. Jake the dog, with his supernatural ability to make any situation comfortable and his complete lack of self-consciousness about asking beings of immense cosmic power if they want to share a snack, becomes Prismo's friend. Not a wish seeker, not a supplicant, not an enemy, a friend. Jake thinks Prismo is funny and interesting and says so. He wants to hang out. He wants to watch movies. He wants to hear what Prismo has been up to and tell him what has been happening back in Ooh. Prismo, who has existed at the center of time in isolation for an incomprehensibly long time, finds this so significant that he sends Jake a jar of his best homemade pickles with a note. He wants Jake to know the door is open. He wants Jake to come back when he has time, not for a wish, but just to be there. When the Lich kills the old man, kills Prismo, the show treats it as a genuine death. Not a cosmic reset. Not an inconvenience. A loss. Jake's rage at the Lich for what it has done is not the rage of someone who lost a powerful asset. It is the grief of someone who lost a friend. The resurrection, accomplished through an elaborate time-bending ritual in Is That You?, involves Finn and Jake traveling through dreamlike spaces, encountering past versions of themselves until they find the moment where the old man was about to be killed, and replace him with a time-displaced version of Jake. Jake, from another timeline, becomes the sleeping old man who dreams Prismo into existence. The old man that Prismo calls to when he is woken up is Jake. The person whose dream Prismo is Jake. Adventure Time uses this development to make Prismo's second existence even more complicated than his first. He is now literally the dream of his best friend. His friend's unconscious mind is what keeps him real. There is something both beautiful and deeply strange about this, and the show does not push you to feel any particular way about it. It just presents it, lets the geometry of it sit, and trusts you to feel the weight. Prismo's powers are specific and important to understand if you want to navigate the multiverse's logic. He can grant any wish with the caveat that wishes are interpreted literally. He is not malicious about this interpretation, not trying to trap the wisher in wordplay. But he also cannot grant what is not actually wished for. If you wish for a specific thing, you get that thing and all its consequences. He can create material objects without it counting as a wish. He can observe all of time. He can construct universes, which is the secret that drives the entire Fiona and Cake series. And there are limits. Anything Golby has claimed cannot be wished back. The basketball hoop materializes, and Prismo looks at it with the particular sadness of someone who has run into the same wall before and does not enjoy confirming that it is still there. The time room itself has layers that the show slowly reveals. It is not just Prismo's living space, it is the mechanism through which time itself flows outward into the multiverse. The time core, revealed in Fiona and Cake, is the actual engine of this process. Two beings resembling a sundial and an hourglass, living in hidden chambers beneath the bachelor apartment surface of the room. These beings generate the time waves that the rest of the multiverse experiences as the passage of time. Prismo is the wish-granting face of this operation. The time core is its beating heart. And then there's the boss. Prismo mentions his boss in the episode Crossover, and the mention is brief, almost casual, but the implication is seismic. Prismo has a boss. The Wishmaster at the center of the multiverse, the most powerful cosmic entity most characters ever encounter, answers to someone. Or something. Fiona and Cake Season 2 gestures at this, shows a phone call, implies an authority structure, and declines to name it. Who is above Prismo? But who runs the operation of which the Time Room is a franchise? Adventure Time puts this question in the frame and leaves it there, dark and intriguing and unanswered. Maybe it is an entity the show has already shown us and we did not recognize it. Maybe it is something entirely new. Maybe the answer is that the multiverse has bureaucracies all the way up, like a cosmic HR department extending into infinities the narrative has not yet found its way to. What matters is that Prismo, for all his power and all his loneliness and all the beauty of his existence at the center of things, is not the top. The hierarchy goes further. The multiverse is bigger. There is always more in Adventure Time. There is always something you have not reached yet. Section 6. Farm World and the Geometry of Wishes. The Lich's wish is 5 words, the extinction of all life. He has been planning this trip to the Time Room for seasons. He has possessed bodies and manipulated heroes, and waited with the patience of a being born before patience was a virtue, and now he is standing before Prismo with the Enchiridion assembled, and his wish ready, and nothing between him and the annihilation of everything. Prismo grants it. He has to. That is the rule. Desire must be honored, even when desire wants to unmake the universe. And then Finn screams his counter-wish and everything breaks. I wish the Lich never even ever existed. This is the wish that creates Farm World. This is the wish that gives us one of Adventure Time's most controlled, most careful explorations of what consequence actually means when you start pulling on the threads of causality. Because Finn's wish sounds simple, it sounds clean. Remove the Lich from existence and everything gets better, right? Surely a world without the greatest force of extinction ever to walk the earth is a world with more life in it, more possibility, more joy. But Prismo tries to warn them, sometimes a well-intentioned wish can lead to nuts. The Lich exists because the mushroom bomb detonated. If the Lich never existed, the bomb cannot have detonated. But the bomb is not just the Lich's origin, it is the origin of everything. Of Ooh, of the candy people, of Jake's magic, of Princess Bubblegum, of Marceline's vampire immunity, of the thousand-year timeline that produced Finn himself. Pull the Lich out of existence, and the whole cathedral of causality starts to shift. The pillars move. The weight redistributes. In Farmworld, Simon Petrikov stopped the bomb. He froze it with the ice crown before it detonated, saving the immediate moment and losing himself in the process. The crown, with nothing left to protect, settled into a centuries-long spasm of abandoned magic. And the world it created is recognizable but wrong. Humans survived. They rebuilt. They live in farming communities and trade networks and small settlements that have slowly re-established something like civilization. Finn grows up with his family. His mother, his father, his brother. He has the life that the mushroom bomb's detonation prevented in the main timeline. But there is no magic, no Jake, at least not as we know him. The Jake in this world is a normal dog. No Princess Bubblegum, no candy people, no Marceline as a vampire. No ooh. And the crown sitting on a frozen farmland is still there, still waiting for a wearer, still encoded with the shape of the Ice King, waiting for a new evergreen to transform. Farmworld Finn, trying to protect his family from a warlord's thugs, finds the crown and puts it on, and becomes almost immediately a version of the Ice King. Because the crown reads the deepest wish, and the wish of a teenage boy trying to protect his family is not so different from the wish of an ancient elemental trying to stop a comet. Protect. Keep safe. Do not let the thing I love be destroyed. And then, because wishes ripple in ways that cannot be controlled, the frozen bomb thaws. The detonation happens anyway, 600 years late, and it finds Farmworld Jake and uses him as the body for a new Lich. Farmworld Jake, sweet, normal, beloved Jake, becomes the vessel for the thing the wish was supposed to prevent. This is what Prismo means by nuts. The wish did not prevent the Lich. It relocated the Lich. It put the Lich in a different body in a different timeline, but the cosmic force that the Lich represents, the drive toward extinction that the green catalyst comet deposited in the universe millions of years ago, cannot be wished away because it is not a contingent fact about the universe. It is an essential one. You cannot wish evil out of existence because evil is not a thing that exists independent of the conditions that produce it. It is a tendency, a capacity, a recurring expression of something the universe keeps needing to work through. The multiverse map shown when Finn and Jake use the Enchiridion is worth dwelling on. Each universe is represented by a unique three-dimensional geometric shape, connected to others by lines that represent either permanent dimensional links or more temporary pathways. There are countless shapes, countless universes. Each one is a reality that exists fully and completely, with its own beings and events and histories. Some were created by wishes, some existed before Prismo. Some, like Fiona's world, were made deliberately by a wishmaster exercising unauthorized creativity. Some, like the baby world, where everyone is a baby, or the funny shape world, are clearly the results of specific wishes gone in specific directions. Some, like the universe where the marvelous misadventures of Flapjack is a real place, had to exist for reasons the show treats with careful irreverence. The time room sits at the center of this map, outside of all of them, the hub from which all reality is accessed and from which time flows outward into each branch. And Farmworld, after the events of Finn the human and Jake the dog, is no longer isolated. Farmworld Finn, now the Farmworld Ice King, gradually losing his mind to the crown, and Farmworld Lich, Jake's body inhabited by the cosmic force of extinction, become recurring elements of the larger multiverse story. In Crossover, the Lich uses Farmworld Finn, manipulates him through the crown's madness, and tries to open a portal to the main universe, to access all dimensions simultaneously, to extend his influence like a fungus through the multiverse. The main Finn crossing between worlds, that has to fight not just the Lich, but a version of himself, the ghost of what he might have been in a kinder world who has ended up in a darker one. This is the geometry of wishes. You cannot wish evil away. You can only change its shape. You can only change which world it shows up in, which body it uses, which tragedy it generates. The Lich is a constant. He is the comet's gift to the universe, the necessary counterweight to life, the shadow that makes the light visible by contrast. Wishing him away does not remove him. It moves him, and in moving him, it moves everything else too. And somewhere in the calculation, a farm boy puts on a crown, and a talking dog becomes a monster, and the bomb goes off 600 years late because the universe was always going to find a way. This does not mean wishes are pointless. Jake's wish, on the same timeline for a perfect sandwich, is pure and clean and grants him exactly what he wants with exactly zero unintended consequences. He wishes for a specific thing. He gets the specific thing. He is satisfied. Prismo is delighted by the simplicity of it. The lesson is not that wishing is dangerous. The lesson is that wishing to change the essential nature of things, to remove from existence the deep structures rather than the surface forms, does not work the way you hope. The lich is a deep structure. A really good sandwich is not. Understanding Farm World is understanding one of the show's core arguments, that good intentions are not enough, that the mechanism by which you try to improve the world matters as much as what you are trying to accomplish, and that pulling on one thread in a reality that is all threads can change everything about where the thread ends up, but it does not change that the thread is there. Section 7. The Dead Worlds. What happens after everything? Finn the human dies. This is not a spoiler in the traditional sense because the show presents it as a given, almost before you have time to feel the shock of it. In Together Again, the third Distant Lands special, the title card appears and it tells you directly, Finn and Jake are dead. And then it shows you a very old Finn, grown tall and gray and full of years, dying in the ordinary human way, and immediately rushing forward with genuine excitement, because he knows where he's going. He has been waiting. Jake died earlier, and Finn has spent the years since Jake's death living fully, caring for people, continuing to be the person the comet made him, but in a part of himself, he has been marking time. He knows Jake is somewhere, he just needs to get there. The land of the dead is not a vague spiritual afterlife. It is a real place with real geography, real politics, real bureaucracy, and 50 separate worlds of varying quality arranged hierarchically based on the moral complexity of the soul's life. The worst of the worst end up in the first dead world, submerged to the neck in gray sludge, slowly being absorbed into the landscape over the geological scale of eternity, which is a description so perfectly specific in its awfulness that it could only have been invented by people who spent years thinking carefully about what a just afterlife actually looks like. The 30th Dead World is pleasant. Green fields, classical architecture, not the kind of place you might describe as a grandmother's calendar come to life. Tree Trunks lives here, having found in death the domestic tranquility she sought through all her alive years, surrounded by Mr. Pig and various other loves from her lifetime, entirely content. The 45th Dead World is crystalline and strange. Its structure is made of something between glass and ice, occupying a pocket of reality that has the quality of a half-remembered dream. Joshua and Margaret live here. Jake's parents, still together, still surrounded by the evidence of their long adventuring life. Still capable of fighting off the monsters that come with them, because of course they are. Death does not blunt Joshua and Margaret. Nothing blunts Joshua and Margaret. And the 50th Dead World is nirvana. The Buddhist sense of the word, not the casual one. It is the world you reach when you have released every desire, including the desire to reach it. To get to the 50th Dead World, you must not want to get there, which sounds like a paradox, but is actually a description of a specific spiritual state. The state of having genuinely let go of attachment. Jake is here, of course he is. Jake spent his whole life caring about things without clinging to them, wanting things without being consumed by wanting them, being present and joyful and then equally present in the aftermath of joy. He arrived at the 50th Dead World because he had already been practicing it for his entire life. The system is overseen by Death, an older being whose demeanor is vaguely like a Western ranch hand and whose authority over the realm is ancient and essentially unchallenged. Was essentially unchallenged. Because by the time Finn arrives, Death is dead. New Death killed him. New Death is the son of Death and Life, two cosmic entities whose marriage is both cosmologically significant and personally strained in the way that marriages between personifications of opposing forces tend to be strained. He grew up in the shadow of two beings with purposes so enormous they barely had time to notice they had a son. He was neglected not through cruelty, but through the overwhelming nature of their respective jobs. Life creates forms for souls to reincarnate into. Death processes souls through the 50 worlds toward eventual reincarnation. They are the mechanism of the cycle. They are always working. Their son had no place in that cycle. He had no function. He was a being of enormous power with no direction for it, and he was lonely and resentful and desperate for connection. The Lich, or more specifically a severed hand of the farm world Lich, found him, made him feel seen, made him feel important, offered him a purpose: destroy all the dead worlds, eliminate the mechanism of reincarnation, end the cycle of life returning to itself. This served the Lich's endless goal of extinction. This gave New Death a reason to matter. He killed his father. He did not want to. The show is careful to show us this. He was genuinely horrified by what he did. But he did it. And then he wore the hat and became the new ruler of the land of the dead and started implementing the plan. Sending everyone who died to the first dead world, regardless of what they had done or been in life. Destroying the other worlds, working toward the elimination of the last world. The 50th, the one he could not access because the only way in required genuine peace. He needed Finn to find Jake. Jake, in the peace of the 50th, would come out for Finn, and when Jaya came out, New Death could get in. The plan works, partly. He destroys the 50th dead world, he scatters its residents, but then Finn and Jake fight him, and Life gives them the kiss of Life, her weapon against her son, and Mr. Fox, who has been Finn's guide through this whole catastrophe, who started the special as just some guy and ends it as the new caretaker of all the dead worlds, uses it. New Death dies. The Lich Hand is scattered. Mr. Fox becomes Death, and the first thing Death does is let everyone out of the first dead world except Wyatt. Because Wyatt is apparently that bad, and Finn, offered the chance to reincarnate, takes it. Out he fist bumps Jake one last time. Jake changes his mind at the last minute and rushes to join the reincarnation. They leave the dead worlds together, falling into whatever comes next, finding each other again the way they always find each other, across whatever distance the universe decides to put between them. This is what the dead worlds say about the Adventure Time universe. Death is not the end, but it is real. It costs something. The people you love are not lost, they are somewhere, but you are here and they are there, and the distance matters even if it is temporary. And the cycle of life and death and reincarnation is not just a philosophical concept. It is infrastructure. It can be threatened. It can be damaged. The Lich's desire to end all life does not just mean killing living things. It means destroying the mechanism that allows life to keep returning. It means breaking the wheel so thoroughly it cannot be repaired. The show treats this with the quiet gravity it deserves. The dead worlds are not treated as an afterlife to comfort viewers or reassure them that everything will be okay. They are treated as a place with real stakes, real politics, real danger. The souls of the dead can be threatened. The reincarnation cycle can be disrupted. And the people who care about these things, an old Finn and a Jake at peace in Nirvana, and Mr. Fox who just wanted a hypoallergenic pillow, have to fight for them. Because in Adventure Time, nothing is safe just because it has always been there. Section 8. Golb, Golbity, and the Chaos Beyond. There is no good way to approach Golb from a comfortable direction. He is not the kind of entity that offers comfortable approaches. He is chaos embodied, which sounds like a description from a philosophy paper, but which the show means in the most literal possible sense. Golb is what chaos is when it decides to have a body and a face and an agenda. He is ancient in a way that even the primordial monsters acknowledge. The Lich, who remembers the sea before existence, calls himself the last scholar of Golb. He dedicated his existence to understanding Golb's ways. He revered Golb. He saw his own drive toward extinction as a form of devotion to Golb's essential nature. This tells us something important. The Lich is not the top of the horror hierarchy in Adventure Time. He is a devoted follower of something older and more fundamental than himself. Golb's history with the show begins with an absence. Magic Man, the Martian wizard, was once a good person. He was second only to Abraham Lincoln and Grob Gob Glob Grod among the Martians, a skilled and powerful and principled being. And then Golb took his wife. Margles, erased from every dimension simultaneously, gone in a way that makes no sense by the rules of the universe as other beings understand them. Prismo cannot bring her back. Golb's actions exist outside the normal mechanism of reversibility. What he takes is gone, not to a different state, but to nothing, to the absence of having been. This is what makes Golb unique among powerful entities in the show. Other powerful things can be countered. Death can be tricked. The Lich can be contained. Even primordial monsters can be compressed into penguins. But Golb does not operate on the logic that makes those counters possible. He is chaos, and chaos does not have rules that can be learned and exploited. You cannot find a loophole in GOLB. You cannot wish away what he has done. The mechanism by which the universe allows things to be fixed does not apply to him. What weakens him is harmony. In the finale, the gathered heroes discover this through trial and error. When they sing together, in genuine harmony rather than performance, Golb is affected. The embodiment of discord is diminished by its opposite. This is not a plot convenience or a cheap resolution device. It is a statement about the nature of chaos and the nature of order and the relationship between them. Chaos is not defeated by power. It is not overpowered by a stronger force that happens to be on the right side. It is reduced by the active, genuine presence of its opposite, and by people actually being in harmony with each other, actually agreeing, actually working together without ego or competition or fear. The finale is also where Betty Groff makes her last choice. She has spent years trying to save Simon. She has become increasingly powerful, increasingly desperate, increasingly willing to use methods that the earlier, more careful version of herself would have questioned. She harnesses Golb's power in an attempt to restore Simon, to use chaos to undo the curse the crown has placed on him. And it works, but the working costs her. Golb and Betty merge. She becomes Golbetti. Inside Golb, something extraordinary happens. Simon is stripped of his ice powers. The crown, inside the chaotic digestive reality of Golb, reverts to its earliest state, the state before Evergreen made it the thing it became, before Gunther's deepest wish encoded the Ice King shape into it. And Simon, pure Simon, just the man, comes out the other side. But Betty stays. The fusion is complete. She cannot undo it. And in that moment of finality, she uses the crown, the object that destroyed the person she loved, and that is now in its original state, to seal Golb, to transform the embodiment of chaos into a state that is less immediately destructive. To convert the entity that was her biggest enemy into her permanent home, because it is the only mechanism available, and she has always been the kind of person who uses the available mechanism even when it costs everything. Golbetti is what Betty becomes. She appears in the Fiona and Cake series in glimpses. In Simon's attempts to communicate with her, she is in there. Her consciousness persists. Just as Prismo's consciousness persists in the dream of a sleeping old man, there is a Betty inside Golb, maintaining something like herself inside the chaos, and she knows Simon is out there and she wants him to be okay and she wants him to let go of his guilt and live his life. The show is careful never to fully resolve this. Simon does not get Betty back. Betty does not get freed. Golbetti exists as this ongoing fact of the universe, a being that is simultaneously a loving person and the embodiment of chaos, which says something about the relationship between love and chaos that is either very dark or very hopeful, depending on how you hold it. One interpretation: love is a form of chaos. It is irrational and ungovernable, and it does not submit to the orderly rules that the rest of reality operates by. Betty loved Simon past the point where loving him made any sense, past the point where it was safe, past every rational argument for stopping. She merged with chaos because chaos was the only thing with the structural integrity to contain her love. They belong together. Another interpretation: even chaos can be inhabited by love. Even the most destructive force in the multiverse is changed by the presence of a person who genuinely loves someone. Golbetty is not just Golb. She is Golby with Betty inside it, and that changes what Golb is. Not completely, not permanently, but measurably. The entity is different for containing her. Either way, the fact of Golbetty is one of Adventure Time's most fascinating ongoing questions. What is she now? What does she want? What does it mean to be fully conscious inside the embodiment of chaos and discord? How does she experience time? Does she remember every moment she and Simon had together? Can she see him from wherever she is, going about his quiet, restored human life in the city of Fiona's world? The show does not answer these questions. It gives us enough to know they exist and leaves the rest to the imagination. This is Adventure Time being. Adventure Time. Trusting you with incompleteness, believing that the questions are as valuable as the answers, that sometimes the most honest thing a story can do is acknowledge the territory it cannot map. Section 9. Fiona World. The universe hidden in a madman's mind. Here is the secret that Prismo has been keeping since before the show had a way to tell it. He was bored. Or not bored exactly. Something more complicated and less dismissible than boredom. Prismo grants wishes for an eternity. He processes desire into reality. He watches the results on his infinite wall of screens. He sees what people ask for and what they actually need, and the gap between those two things and the consequences that fill that gap. He is the mechanism of desire. He understands desire from the inside, from the mechanism's perspective, better than any being alive. And then one day he wondered what it would feel like to create something that was not the product of someone else's desire. Something of his own. Something he made because he wanted to make it, not because the rules required him to. So he built a universe, illegally. The universe he built was inspired by his favorite of the worlds he oversees. Yet he took the shape of that world and reflected it, kept the basic geography, kept the magic, kept the essential energy of the place, but flipped the gender presentations of the major characters. Finn became Fiona. Jake became Cake. Princess Bubblegum became Prince Gumball. Ice King became Ice Queen. And so on, rippling through the whole ensemble, creating parallel versions that rhymed with the originals without being copies. He gave them histories and relationships. He wrote their adventures. He watched them live. He gave Cake her stretching powers. He gave Fiona her heroism. He created Marshall Lee, the Vampire King's gender-swapped counterpart, and gave him a relationship with Prince Gumball that was more honestly articulated than some of the relationships in the main timeline had been allowed to be. And then he hid the whole thing in the Ice King's head. This decision is simultaneously brilliant and somewhat unhinged, which is entirely consistent with Prismo's character. The Ice King's mind was, at the time, a vast, disorganized, magic-saturated space with essentially no coherent interior organization. The Crown's 1,000-year corruption had left Simon's original psyche buried under so many layers of delusion and fantasy and obsession that there was effectively room. You could fit a whole universe in there, and the Ice King would process it as inspiration for his fan fiction, rather than as the actual alternate reality it was. So the Ice King started writing the Fiona and Cake stories. He believed he was creating them. He was channeling them. The stories that charmed his viewers and baffled Finn and Jake were not inventions. They were reports. They were, like in the most technically precise sense, documentary fiction. The Ice King accurately describing events happening in an unauthorized universe stored in his own mind, through the distorting lens of his own obsessions, and calling it creativity. When Simon was healed, when Golb stripped the crown's curse and Simon emerged as himself again, the magic in his mind disappeared. And Fiona's world, built on the Ice King's magic, lost its own magic. The Candy Kingdom became an ordinary city block. The adventure-ready landscape became Midtown, a perfectly ordinary urban neighborhood with a perfectly ordinary coffee shop where Fiona worked, and a perfectly ordinary apartment building where she and Cake lived. The residents lost their memories of their magical lives. They became ordinary people who did not know they had ever been anything else. Fiona and Cake are the exceptions. They retain their original forms, restored by Prismo when the trio arrived in the time room. They are the only inhabitants of their world who know what it was. They are the only ones who remember being a hero and a magical cat in a world of magic, and then woke up one day to find themselves a barista and a house cat in a world of grocery stores and anxiety and rent. The Fiona and Cake series is their journey back to a world that is worth being in. Scarab, the God Auditor, is the mechanical antagonist of Season 1, a bureaucratic enforcer of the multiverse's rules who wants to delete Fiona's world because it is unauthorized. He wants Prismo's job. He has wanted it for a very long time. And Prismo's illegal creation gives him both the evidence he needs to bring Prismo down and the opportunity to demonstrate his own worthiness for the title of Wishmaster. He is petty in the way that all bureaucracies tend toward pettiness, driven not by any genuine philosophical disagreement with what Prismo did, but by jealousy so sustained it has become indistinguishable from conviction. The journey through the multiverse that follows is one of the show's most ambitious undertakings. Fiona, Cake, and Simon travel through alternate universe after alternate universe, each one a different version of the world they know. Farm World, where an old battle-hardened Finn lives in the aftermath of his wishes' consequences. The Extinct World, where the Lich achieved his victory, killed everything, and then had a breakdown because it turned out that without life to destroy, his entire sense of purpose collapsed. The Vampire World, where a version of Simon died before finding the crown, and the Vampire King used it instead to blot out the sun. The Winter World, where the crown was transferred to Princess Bubblegum, and the roles of Ice King and Candy Royalty are reversed. Each world is a study in divergence. In what different decisions or different accidents or different versions of the same cosmic events produce? The multiverse is not just a collection of alternates, it is a library of arguments about what matters. The Extinct World argues that victory without someone to see you is not victory. The Vampire World argues that the crown's power without the crown's madness is still dangerous. But the Winter World argues that the burden of the Ice King is not inherent to Simon, but inherent to the crown, and that burden will find whoever is available to carry it. The resolution of Season 1 is Simon, not Fiona. Simon has been trying to reach Betty through GOLB. He has been using his growing understanding of magic to build a ritual, traveling to universes where he still has the crown's power in order to collect the resources he needs. And throughout this journey, he has been forced to reckon with a truth he has been avoiding, that his relationship with Betty was not as healthy or as reciprocal as his grief has framed it, that he was often selfish, that she gave more than he received, that her sacrifice was rooted in love, yes, but also in a pattern of self-erasure that he contributed to without fully recognizing. In Episode 9, Casper and Nova, Simon enters a trance to communicate with Betty through GOLB. He relives their relationship. He sees it clearly. He understands what he understood imperfectly when he was living it. And he does not fix it. He cannot fix it because the chance has passed. What he can do is carry the understanding forward. Be different in whatever comes next. Not repeat the pattern with the new people who have entered his life. This is what Adventure Time does with its adult characters. It gives them not transformation, but comprehension. The show is honest enough to know that understanding your failures does not undo them. It does not give Simon a magic solution. It gives him clarity. The weight of what he knows, carried consciously, carried with intention. And Fiona's world is made official. Simon removes the universe from his mind, thus making it real in a new way, external and self-sustaining. Scarab's bosses call off the deletion. The world is authorized. It exists now on its own terms, not as a storage file in Simon's subconscious, but as a reality, small and ordinary and full of people who do not know what they used to be, but are perhaps exactly what they need to be now. Scarab's breakdown at this moment is the most humanizing thing the show could have done with him. He has been rigid and cruel and petty throughout the season, and when his legal victory evaporates, he goes from bureaucratic antagonist to something sadder and more recognizable. A person whose entire sense of self was built on a hierarchy that did not value him, who responded to that by valorizing the hierarchy even more fiercely, and hoping that extreme compliance would eventually produce the recognition he was owed. When that gambit fails, when the system rewards Prismo's law-breaking rather than punishing it, he breaks. He tries to destroy Fiona's world out of pure spite. Not because he believes it should be destroyed, because it is the only power he has left. He fails. He is defeated by an alliance of beings from across the multiverse who came together, because Fiona and Cake, in their traveling, made friends. He is contained in an egg. And then Prismo gives him a job, makes him the assistant, lets him stay in the time room, the place Scarab has always wanted to belong to, but in a subordinate role on Prismo's terms. This is mercy that could easily be read as cruelty. But the show leaves it ambiguous, and by season 2, Scarab is grudgingly becoming someone. Not a good person yet, but a different person. A person who has maybe been given the chance the world never gave him, to matter without having to destroy something to do it. Section 10. The Cosmic Hierarchy. Who rules the multiverse? Let's take stock of everything we have assembled and lay out the shape of it, because the Adventure Time multiverse has a structure, a hierarchy of power and significance, and understanding that structure is understanding why the show's climaxes feel as enormous as they do. At the bottom, in the most literal and least philosophical sense, is everything we normally think of as real. The physical universe, Earth, the Candy Kingdom, the beings who live there and love each other and fight monsters and eat sandwiches and have ordinary, terrible, wonderful lives. This is where Finn and Jake operate. This is the layer of existence that the show spends most of its time in, and it is real, and it matters, and it is worth protecting. But it is the bottom layer of a much taller structure. Above the physical universe are the alternate realities: Farm World, Fiona World, the Vampire World, the Winter World, the Extinct World, the Baby World, the Funny Shape World, the World of Flapjack. These are not separate from the main universe in the sense of being unrelated to it. They are parallel expressions of it, generated by wishes and accidents and the show's logic of divergence. They exist simultaneously with Ooh. They are as real as Ooh. Their inhabitants' lives are as significant as the lives of Finn and Jake. But they are variations, rather than originals, expressions of a base reality, rather than the base reality itself. Above both of these is the structure of cosmic entities: death and life, managing the cycle of souls. The cosmic owl, appearing in prophetic dreams, never interfering. Party god, whose purpose is less solemn but whose power is genuine. Grob Gob Glob Grud, the four-headed Martian ruler deity who intervened against Orgalorg and died eventually, as all things do. These are the beings who manage the mechanisms of existence, who ensure that the cycle of life and death and reincarnation keeps turning, who appear in dreams and visions and at cosmic parties in the time room. Above them is Prismo, the Wishmaster, the dream made real, the being at the center of time who processes desire into reality and watches all of it from his bachelor apartment at the hub of everything. He is the most powerful entity most characters ever directly interact with. But his power is bounded by GOLB and by his own rules and by whoever his unnamed boss is. But within those bounds, he is effectively unlimited. The Citadel exists outside normal reality, accessible by committing a cosmic crime. It is a prison for beings whose crimes are so large that ordinary justice cannot contain them. Its guardians are crystalline entities of enormous power. Finn's father, Martin, was imprisoned there. The Lich was imprisoned there, briefly, in a way that did not take. Many of the ancient prisoners are almost certainly primordial monsters, entities from before time who were too dangerous to leave loose in the universe and could not be destroyed. Above Prismo, somehow, is his boss. The voice on the phone that the show gestures at but never names. An authority structure that extends beyond the Wishmaster, beyond the time room, and into some region of the cosmic hierarchy the show has not yet fully opened. And then Golb, the embodiment of chaos and discord, operating outside the normal logic of the hierarchy. Not above Prismo in the sense of being his superior in a chain of command, but beyond the system in the sense of being the thing the system cannot fully contain. He is the limit on wish magic. He is the reason Margles is gone and Betty is fused, and some things cannot be undone. And above even Golby, in some readings of the cosmology informed by the Enchiridion and its description of reality, is the Aniverse, the nothingness that precedes existence, the void from which even the primordial monsters emerged. The cosmic imagination, which is the Adventure Time multiverse's deepest level, the sentient totality of everything, the dream that contains all dreams, but the awareness that holds all awareness. This is the level the show approaches only in fragments, in the Enchiridian's descriptions and in the Death Battle Wiki's careful reconstructions, and in the implication of infinite multiverses inside infinite multiverses that Jake accidentally triggers when he asks Buko to upgrade his understanding. Every time the scale gets clear, Adventure Time makes it bigger. The primordial monsters, Orgalorg, Kokentepi, possibly the Lich, entities from before the universe that still haunt its edges. The Lich specifically, the last scholar of Golby, the embodiment of death, the Green Comet's gift to an unprepared world. The Catalyst. Comets themselves, not just natural phenomena, but intentional agents of change managed by whatever intelligence manages the 1,000-year schedule. The elemental system, watched with the 4 elementals representing fire, ice, candy, and slime, cycling through incarnations, managing the essential qualities of the physical world. The dead worlds, all 50 of them, from the hellish first to the nirvana of the 50th. The time core, generating time waves from its hidden chamber inside the time room. Prismo, dreaming above all of it. His unnamed boss, above Prismo. Golby, beside all of it, unconstrained. The antiverse, beneath everything. The nothing from which everything came. And at every level, in every layer, the show insists on the same thing. It matters. The candy people matter. Finn's love for his friends matters. Jake's wish for a sandwich matters. The specific texture of specific lives, the conversations and the losses and the moments of connection and the moments of sitting alone with something you cannot fix, all of it matters in the same way and to the same degree. Adventure Time does not treat the cosmic as more important than the personal. It treats them as the same size. The universe is enormous and ancient and strange, and it is also exactly as large as the space between two people who love each other. This is the show's great argument, delivered over 10 seasons and a series of specials and a spin-off and an ever-expanding mythology. The scale of things does not determine their value. Prismo, at the center of the multiverse with access to all of time, is not more important than Jake. He is not less important either. They are both exactly as important as they are to each other, and that is the only metric that matters. The multiverse is an infrastructure for connection. That is what all this machinery, all these dead worlds and time rooms and catalyst comets and primordial monsters and wishes and consequences is in service of. The chance for beings to be in relationship with each other, to know each other and care about each other and choose each other, across whatever distances the universe decides to put between them. Simon chose Betty. Betty chose Simon. The Lich chose extinction and then had nothing to choose. Jake chose peace and then chose Finn again. Finn chose to stay rather than transcend. Fiona chose her ordinary world over the magical one she had lost. Prismo chose to create something for himself and then chose to protect it when protection was required. Every character in this enormous, layered, ancient universe makes choices, and the choices are not diminished by the scale of what surrounds them. If anything, the scale makes the choices more significant. In a universe this vast, choosing to be here, to be present, to care about the specific small things in front of you, is one of the most powerful acts available. The cosmic hierarchy of Adventure Time is not a ranking of importance. It is a map of how connection works at scale, how the smallest choice ripples outward into alternate timelines and dead worlds and the dreams of wishmasters and the memory of primordials, how nothing is isolated, how everything touches everything across all the universes, across all the 1,000-year cycles of comets and change, across the distance between life and death, and the gulf between existence and chaos. How love, which is not on the hierarchy because it exists at every level of it simultaneously, is the only force that Golb cannot fully claim. Section 11. The Enchiridion and the Keys to Everything. There is an object in Adventure Time that functions the way a skeleton key functions in an old building. It fits every lock because it was made before the locks existed. It is older than the political structures that currently control it. It carries instructions meant for a version of the world that no longer quite exists. It is simultaneously a book of heroic guidelines, a cosmological map, a key to the entire multiverse, and a ticking piece of evidence that the universe has been planning something for a very long time. The Enchiridion, which translates roughly from the Greek as the handbook, appears early in Adventure Time as a straightforward MacGuffin. Finn wants it because the legend of it says only a great hero can retrieve it. He retrieves it, he carries it, he uses it as a weapon sometimes, throwing it at things, which is the most Finn way to treat a sacred relic of cosmic significance. For several seasons, it is just the book, the special book, the one with the important advice. And then Season 4's finale begins building toward what the Enchiridion actually is, and the reveal is one of those moments where Adventure Time earns its reputation as a show that was always playing a deeper game than it appeared to be. The Enchiridion is the key to the multiverse. Specifically, when the sword on its cover is rotated sideways, it reveals a holographic map of the known universes, every reality represented as a distinct geometric shape floating in the void of the multiverse, connected to other shapes by lines of dimensional linkage. Prismo's time room is at the center. The main universe is a sphere inside a cube. Farmworld has its own shape. Every named reality is on the map, and the map extends far beyond the named ones into darkness that represents universes the show has not yet found occasion to visit. The Enchiridion can be powered with gems, 9 specific gems embedded in the crowns and jewelry worn by royalty across Oo are the gems of power, and inserting them into the appropriate slots in the book activates its highest function, opening a portal to the time room, to Prismo, to the mechanism of wishes. This is what the Lich wanted. This is why he manipulated Finn for an entire season, why he possessed Billy, why he played the long game with such extraordinary patience. He needed Finn's access to the Enchiridion and the gems of royalty that Finn could obtain without suspicion. He nearly got it. He would have gotten it if Finn had not destroyed the book at the last moment, which itself paradoxically created the portal. The Lich went through. Finn and Jake went after him. The multiverse became accessible in a way it had never been accessible before, and the show's mythology opened up like a flower that had been waiting for exactly this pressure to bloom. But the Enchiridion's history goes deeper than the Lich's use of it. Simon Petrikov and Betty Groff found it before the Mushroom War in the Hindu Kush Mountains in Pakistan. Simon had been searching for it as part of his academic work on magical artifacts. Betty found the runes that pointed toward its location. They dug it up together, the two of them in the mountains doing the thing they both loved best, finding the evidence of a world more strange and wonderful than the rational consensus allowed. That is when and where the book began its 1,000-year journey toward the moment when Finn would throw it at a worm on his bed, completely unconscious of what he was handling. From a mountain in Pakistan to a treehouse in the land of Oo, passing through the Mushroom War and 1,000 years of magical reconstruction, waiting in plain sight as a hero's manual and a conversation starter, while its real function sat dormant in the arrangement of its pages. The Betty later retrieved the farm world version of the Enchiridion, using it during the Elements miniseries in her attempts to fix what the 4 elementals had done to Oo, and then in her final gambit to restore Simon. The book shows up wherever the story's deepest needs are located. It is drawn toward the pivotal moments the way certain objects in certain stories always are. Not by magic exactly, but by narrative gravity. The places where the most important things happen are the places that tend to have the important objects in them, and the Enchiridion has a very specific sense of where it needs to be. The gems of power that unlock the Enchiridion's portal function are also individually significant. They are embedded in the crowns and jewelry of Oo's royalty, not by coincidence, but because the elemental system of Oo is connected to the multiverse's structure. The candy gem, the fire gem, the slime gem, these are expressions of the 4 elemental forces that organize the physical world. And those forces are themselves connected, through chains of cosmic causality that Adventure Time does not fully articulate but continuously implies us. to the larger structures of the multiverse above them. Princess Bubblegum's candy gem protected Finn from the Lich's mind control in Mortal Folly. It broke under the pressure, and what protected Finn in its absence was something the show describes as liking someone a lot, the emotional warmth that Bubblegum had embedded in the sweater she knitted for him. The gem failed. The feeling held. Adventure Time is making a deliberate argument about the relationship between symbolic power and emotional reality, about which one is actually more durable, and it is making it in the middle of an action sequence involving a skeleton necromancer and a sweater. The Enchiridion was destroyed or transformed or became the portal it always was in the end. The stone it became when Finn broke it cracked open and the multiverse came through. The book fulfilled its purpose. It was never the book that mattered. The book was always just the container for the function, the same way the ice crown is a container for wish fulfillment, the same way the time room is a container for Prismo. The container is not the thing. The thing is the thing. Adventure Time keeps making this distinction, and it matters every time. Section 12. Marceline. The Nightosphere and the Inheritance of Monsters. There is a complicated sentence at the center of Marceline Abadir's existence. She is the daughter of the ruler of the Nightosphere, the dimension of total evil, the cosmic repository of all darkness and harm and accumulated malice. Her father, Hunson Abadir, is a primordial monster or something adjacent to one, a being ancient enough and destructive enough that his daughter grew up with genuine first-hand experience of what the phrase pure evil might actually mean. He sucked the souls of the living for sustenance. He tried to eat her fries. He was absent for essentially the entirety of her childhood in any meaningful parental sense. And Marceline is also, somehow, a deeply good person. This is not a contradiction the show papers over or ignores. Marceline knows what her father is, yet she has a complicated, thorny, occasionally devastating relationship with him that the show returns to periodically across its run. She does not excuse him. She does not simplify him. But she also, in the end, loves him in the particular way you love a parent who has been catastrophically inadequate, fully, grudgingly, with clear eyes and no illusions. The Nightosphere is a genuine region of the multiverse's geography. It is accessible from Ooh, which raises questions about the structural arrangement that the show handles with its characteristic, confident imprecision. Other than to establish its existence and its connection to Hunson, the show does not map the Nightosphere in detail. What we know is that it is a place of sustained suffering, that Hunson rules it with comprehensive indifference to the experience of its inhabitants, and that it was created as or evolved into the dimension-level embodiment of evil, which connects it to Golby and to the Lich and to the broader hierarchy of destructive forces in the cosmology. Marceline's mother Elise was human, and this detail matters more than the show ever directly says. Marceline is half-human. She is the child of the most ancient darkness and the most ordinary mortality. She was born during a world that was already in the process of destroying itself, half of the dimension of evil and half of the civilization that the Mushroom War was in the process of ending. She grew up as the last half-human child of a dying world, protected briefly by a kind man who was losing his mind. Then alone, then a vampire, then immortal, then 1,000 years old in a world she had watched be born from the rubble of the one she remembered. Vampirism in Adventure Time is its own mythology. In the Stakes miniseries, we learned that the vampire species was one of the dominant predators of the post-Mushroom War period. Before the new creatures of magical Ooh had fully established themselves, when humans were still scattered and vulnerable and the world was still sorting out what it was going to become, vampires and rainicorns were at the top of the food chain. Marceline hunted them. She hunted them because they were hunting humans, and whatever she is and whatever complicated inheritance she carries, she sides with the living. She always sides with the living. In destroying the Vampire King, she absorbed his essence, his powers, the sum of everything vampiric that he was. This is why she is a vampire, but it is also why she is more than a vampire. So she carries the Vampire King in her the way the Lich carries the memory of the Sea of Monsters. Not as a possession, not as a parasite, but as an inheritance she did not ask for and has spent 1,000 years learning to carry without being consumed by it. Her relationship with Simon is the emotional spine that makes Adventure Time's mythology feel personal, rather than merely mythological. All the cosmic machinery means something because of the specific, irreplaceable relationship between a confused and frightened human man and a small child in a ruined world, and because of how thoroughly the universe managed to separate them afterward. The crown took Simon. The Vampire King's essence took Marceline. The Mushroom War took their time together, and Marceline kept Simon's letters and kept his memory alive across 1,000 years. That because the things that matter deserve to be kept even when keeping them is the only form of honoring them you have access to. She also made music from the grief. That is perhaps the most Marceline thing she does. She takes her longest, deepest, most unresolvable pain, and she makes songs out of it. In I Remember You, she sings something heartbreaking with Simon, who does not know what they are to each other, who does not know why he keeps seeking her out, who can only feel the pull of something ancient and important toward a person his crown-addled brain can no longer fully identify. And Marceline sings with him and for him and about the specific, unmanageable fact of loving someone who has been taken from you without being taken away. This is the Nightosphere's opposite. This is the answer to Hunson's dimension of pure evil, which consumes and diminishes and never creates. Marceline creates. She creates constantly. She makes music and art and connection from the materials of her own loss. And in doing so, she demonstrates something Adventure Time keeps returning to from every angle, that the darkness you inherit does not determine what you do with the light you find. The broader context of the Nightosphere in the multiverse is worth dwelling on briefly. Hunson Abadir is described as the source of all evil, or at least the ruler of the dimension that concentrates and embodies it. This connects him directly to the primordials, to the sea of monsters from before time, to the Lich's reverence for Golb. Evil in the Adventure Time. Cosmology is not a force of equal and opposite weight to good. It is older. Now, it predates good. Good emerged later, as a function of life and civilization and the capacity for care. Evil was there in the void before any of those things existed. This does not mean good is doomed. It means good is younger. It means good has the energy of the newly arrived, the intensity of something that is still figuring out what it wants to be, while evil has the settled weight of an ancient thing that has been itself for a very long time. And in Adventure Time's accounting, the newly arrived, the energetic, the specific, the loving, the present, keeps finding ways to hold its own against the settled ancient weight. Marceline is proof of this arithmetic. She is the daughter of that ancient weight. She is also genuinely, irreducibly herself. And these facts coexist in her with the stability of someone who has had a very long time to make peace with complicated origins. Section 13. The Elemental Cycle. Fire, ice, candy, slime. Before candy kingdoms and ice palaces and flame principalities were political structures, they were something else. They were expressions of 4 fundamental forces that have organized life on Earth across every era the planet has known. The Adventure Time elementals are not just magical beings. They are the current incarnations of an ancient system, a cycling arrangement of fire, ice, candy, and slime that has been managing the essential qualities of the physical world since at least the Cretaceous period and possibly much longer. The episode Evergreen introduces this system in its ancient form, 4 elementals from the dinosaur era, each embodying one of the 4 forces, existing in a kind of cosmic balance that the arrival of the green catalyst comet was about to disrupt. Their names were Urgence Evergreen, ice, a fire elemental, a slime elemental, and a candy elemental. They argued about the crown and the comet. Evergreen froze them. The crown was made. The rest is the trajectory of the entire show. The elementals are reborn across eras. The current incarnations, 1,000 years after the Mushroom War, are Princess Bubblegum, Candy, Marceline, actually no longer the Flame Elemental's successor. This was originally a theory that the show complicated. Patience St. Pim, Ice, and a Slime Elemental. Patience St. Pim is particularly interesting. She froze herself under the ocean before the mushroom bomb detonated, correctly anticipating the war's outcome, and waited it out. 1,000 years later, she thawed herself and discovered that the New World's elementals were not fulfilling their potential. She took it upon herself to fix this, which in practice meant kidnapping them and forcing them into states of elemental purity that the world had not asked for and definitely did not want. The Elementals miniseries shows what happens when the elemental forces are unchecked. Candy Ooh is a crystalline nightmare of enforced sweetness where everything has been converted to candy, and the candy people's personalities have been smoothed into something placid and terrifying. Fire Ooh is a constant conflagration. Slime Ooh is what you expect. And Ice Ooh is the evergreen nightmare made contemporary. That the Crown's original failed magic finally finding full expression in a world where the Crown's inheritor has had 1,000 years to practice. The elemental cycle connects to the Crown, to the Gems of Power, to the Enchiridion, to the Multiverse. Everything is connected in the Adventure Time cosmology because the show was built with the understanding that a mythology should be internally consistent at every level, that the small things should echo the large things, that the large things should be expressions of the small ones. Princess Bubblegum's relationship to the candy elemental force is one of the show's most subtle ongoing character notes. She is candy, fundamentally, grown from a piece of gum, in the aftermath of the Mushroom War, literally building herself and her kingdom from the very material of her elemental nature. But she's also a scientist, a rationalist, a being who distrusts magic and the forces she cannot control and measure. She is the elemental of a force she philosophically prefers to treat as a non-magical resource. This gives her entire characterization a specific texture. She is a cosmic force who does not fully believe in cosmic forces, which is either the most grounded position imaginable or a form of self-denial so profound it shapes everything she does. Her relationship with Marceline completes something the show has been building toward for a very long time. They are the candy, elemental, and the ancient being who absorbed the Vampire King and is the daughter of the ruler of the Nightosphere. They are scientific order and wild, vampiric, musical chaos. They are, in the show's final accounting, in love. And their love is not a subplot, as it is the resolution of one of the show's deepest arguments about the nature of opposites. They do not cancel each other out. They complete each other. They are each more fully themselves in each other's presence than they are alone. Candy and whatever Marceline is, structure and wildness, careful calculation and the howl of a 1,000-year-old monster who learned to make songs out of grief. These are not contradictions. They are a relationship. Section 14. Jake the Dog. The most cosmic ordinary being. Jake never gets the credit his cosmological significance probably deserves. He gets credit for being a great character. He gets credit for being funny and warm and the best possible friend to a boy who desperately needed one. Yet he gets credit for his magical stretch powers and his willingness to eat any food presented to him and his capacity for napping in almost any situation. He does not get enough credit for being deeply, genuinely strange at the level where the show's mythology is most interesting. Jake is not a normal dog. He is not even a normal magical dog. He is a magical dog whose father, Joshua, was infected with a bite from a shape-shifting creature while on an adventure, and whose mother, Margaret, was not infected, and whose existence is therefore the result of a mutagenic process that the show never fully explains, but which produced a being whose magical powers have no hard ceiling that the show ever discovers. He can stretch. But the show eventually reveals that what Jake does is not strictly stretching, but he can reshape himself at the molecular level. He can change his density. He can become almost anything. He can shrink to the size of a cell and enter a bloodstream. He can expand to fill a massive space. He can change his constituent materials. His imagination is the limit of his power, and Jake's imagination, it turns out, is genuinely extraordinary, which is not what you initially expect from a being who spends much of the show asleep on a couch. Jake's children, the 5 pups he has with Lady Rainicorn, are each unique. They did not inherit a simple blend of dog and Rainicorn traits. They inherited something more chaotic and less predictable. One is a musician. One has reality-altering powers connected to her emotions. One is a shapeshifter like Jake, but with entirely different applications. One is something that defies easy categorization, and one married an alien and lives in space. They are 5 distinct expressions of an impossible combination. and their existence suggests that whatever Jake is carries a generativity, a capacity for novel being, that goes beyond anything the normal magical dog category would predict. There is the question of the yellow comet. The show implies that Jake may be connected to it, may be or may be descended from the incarnation of whatever concept the yellow comet embodied. The show never confirms this. It puts the yellow comet in the frame and then declines to name what it was carrying. Was it creativity? Flexibility? The capacity for genuine acceptance of whatever life presents? All of these are things Jake embodies with unusual consistency, and in all of them are things the world would benefit from having as a cosmic constant. As a quality, the universe decides to send a delivery of every 1,000 years. What we do know is that Prismo's resurrection depends on Jake. The old man who sleeps to keep Prismo real is a time-displaced version of Jake, sitting in a hidden chamber in the time room, sleeping, dreaming, maintaining through his unconscious state the existence of the most powerful cosmic entity most beings in the multiverse will ever interact with. Jake is the foundation of the wish-granting system. He is literally the ground beneath Prismo's reality. This means that Jake's death, which happens off-screen between the original series and Distant Lands, and which the show handles with enormous care in Together Again, has cosmic implications that the show gestures at but does not fully articulate. The old man in the time room is a past version of Jake. He is not the Jake who died of natural causes in the present timeline. He is an alternate Jake, or a Jake from a specific moment in time, preserved in the time room's timeless space, sleeping forever because the structure of time requires it. The Jake who died and went to the 50th Dead World is the main timeline Jake. They are the same being expressed in two different time streams, which is either exactly fine or deeply strange depending on how comfortable you are with the mechanics of Adventure Time time travel. The show is comfortable with it. Jake was comfortable with everything in the end. The 50th Dead World is where beings go when they have achieved the peace that comes from genuinely accepting everything. Jake, who spent his whole life caring without clinging, wanting without consuming, being present without demanding that the present continue forever, arrived there having spent a whole life practicing for it. His final choice, to follow Finn into reincarnation at the last moment, is the most Jake thing he could have done. He had found perfect peace. He had genuinely let go of everything. And then Finn started to leave, and Jake thought about it for 1 second and decided that peace could wait. He wanted to be with his brother. Again. In whatever form comes next, across whatever new life the universe hands them. That is Jake the dog. Are you willing to leave Nirvana for friendship? The most cosmic, ordinary being in any multiverse. Section 15. What the multiverse is for. Let's rest here at the end of our long walk through Adventure Time's extraordinary cosmological architecture and ask the question that all this machinery is in service of. What is the multiverse for? Not in the mechanical sense, not the description of its function, but in the meaning sense. What does it all add up to? The Adventure Time multiverse is enormous. It contains infinite, alternate timelines and dead worlds and cosmic entities, and ancient primordials and wish-granting dream beings, and the embodiment of chaos, and a god auditor who became an assistant, and a woman who became chaos, and a boy who is the incarnation of life, and a skeleton who is the incarnation of death, and a dog who is nirvana, and 1,000 years of magic and music and grief and candy, and the bones of a civilization that destroyed itself, and the flowers growing from the bones. It is a universe that takes the question of what matters, of what has value, of what is worth protecting, and answers it at every scale simultaneously. It says, all of it. The Candy Kingdom and the Primordial Void. The 50th Dead World and the sludge pits of the first. The wish for extinction and the wish for a sandwich. The woman who became chaos and the man who survived her sacrifice. The friendship between an old cosmic entity and a magical dog who visited because he thought Prismo seemed cool. All of it is the same size, measured by the only measurement that works across scales. How much it matters to the beings involved. The universe does not have a hierarchy of significance. Finn's love for Jake is not smaller than the Lich's ancient drive toward extinction. They are exactly as large as each other and in constant conversation. And that conversation is what the multiverse exists to hold. Adventure Time builds this enormous structure to make one argument, that being here, being present, choosing connection over transcendence, choosing the specific person in front of you over the abstract idea of something better elsewhere. It is the thing the universe has been trying to produce all along. The comets are not delivering power. They are delivering the capacity for presence. The catalyst comets bring life, death, change, transcendence, and Finn refuses the last one because the specific human reality of being with specific people is more valuable to him than the cosmic option of being everywhere and nowhere, experiencing everything without the weight of being somewhere particular. The multiverse is evidence that the universe takes connection seriously enough to build infinite machinery in service of it. 50 dead worlds in a time room, and a hierarchy of cosmic entities, and a 1,000-year cycle of change. All of this to give life the conditions it needs to keep producing specific beings who care about each other in specific ways that cannot be generalized or scaled or abstracted away. Every version of Finn and Jake across every timeline are variations on the same theme. Every alternate universe is a different experiment in what conditions are needed for the essential thing, the thing the show values above all else, to emerge. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it does not. The extinct world is the universe in which it did not, and the Lich, having achieved his victory, is alone in it and broken by the loneliness. Because even the ancient drive toward extinction cannot fully survive the absence of everything that ever made existence a conversation. Even the Leech, in his depressed hibernation in the extinct world, is a kind of testimony. He wanted extinction. He achieved extinction. He got everything he wanted. And it turned out that a universe with nothing in it is exactly as empty for the being who made it that way as it is for everyone who used to be there. Victory, without someone to have won against, is just isolation with extra steps. The multiverse is for having someone to talk to, someone to care about, someone to find in the dead worlds or in the authorized alternate universe stored in a madman's mind, or at the center of time with a jar of pickles and a wall of infinite screens showing everything that ever happened or ever will. That is the answer. That is what all of this is for. Think about every layer we walked through tonight. The monsters in the void before time. The comets carrying essential qualities across a 1,000-year schedule. The bomb that remade civilization. Simon and his crown and his letters. Prismo in his room, dreaming, being dreamed. The Lich achieving victory and collapsing into depression in the silence it created. Fiona learning that an ordinary world is worth living in. Jake choosing Finn over Nirvana. All of it pointing the same direction. All of it drawing the same conclusion from different angles, with different materials, in different emotional registers. The question the show never stops asking is not whether the universe is large. It clearly is. It is whether largeness matters more than intimacy, i.e. whether the cosmic is more significant than the personal. And Adventure Time's answer, delivered over and over in different voices and different storylines and different levels of the hierarchy, is no. The cosmic and the personal are the same size. They have always been the same size. The multiverse is just the personal writ very, very large. And the personal is just the multiverse compressed into something you can hold in your two hands. You can hold a jar of pickles in two hands. Prismo figured this out. The most powerful wish-granting entity in the multiverse learned something that the universe built infinite machinery to teach. That being known by one person who chooses to be there is worth more than all the power the cosmos can offer. But that showing up to watch a movie with someone who wants your company is the act the whole structure was built to enable. Adventure Time builds a cosmology more elaborate and internally consistent than most fantasy literature manages in 10 volumes, and then it turns that cosmology toward the simplest possible conclusion. The universe is large and ancient and strange, and the best thing in it is the same as the best thing in your small, ordinary life. Something or someone that means enough to you that you would leave Nirvana at the last moment to be with them again. Someone whose voice heard across the vast silence of the dead worlds makes the silence worth having survived. So here we are at the edge of it. everything assembled and accounted for, the monsters in the void before the void. So the comets carrying change to an unprepared world on a 1,000-year schedule that nobody asked for and everybody needed. The war that ended one civilization and cracked open the ground for another. The man who lost himself to save a child and the woman who lost herself to save the man. The dream who became a person. The wish that created a world. The death that was not an ending. The chaos that was not the final word. And underneath all of it, running through every layer from the primordial monsters to the sandwich Jake wished for at the center of time, there is a single insistent thread. The thing Adventure Time keeps returning to no matter how far into the cosmic it travels, no matter how large the stakes become, no matter how many alternate timelines and dead worlds and unauthorized universes and ancient beings from before existence get layered into the frame. Connection. Specific, irreducible, impossible to scale connection between specific beings who chose each other. Prismo chose to make a universe for himself, breaking the rules because he was lonely and creative and wanted to see what it felt like to make something that was his. That is not a cosmic act. That is an intimately human one. He wanted to make something and share it, even if sharing it meant hiding it in the head of a madman. Jake chose to leave Nirvana, the highest spiritual achievement in the entire cosmological structure, because his brother was going somewhere new, and Jake wanted to be there too. That is not a cosmic act either. That is love. How plain and direct and completely indefensible from any rational perspective, and perfectly defensible from the only perspective that matters. Simon sang the Cheers theme to keep a small child from crying in the middle of an apocalypse. Betty traveled 1,000 years into the future and spent that entire time looking for a way to bring him back to himself. Neither of these acts moved mountains or reshaped timelines or altered the structure of the multiverse, except they did all of those things because the people involved in them went on to shape everything else that happened. Adventure Time built a multiverse to say something very specific and very human. It built all this machinery, all these layers, all this ancient strangeness, in order to arrive at the same place it always starts. Two friends sitting together, choosing each other, finding each other across dead worlds and unauthorized universes, and the aftermath of every catastrophe the cosmos has in its inventory. What time is it? It is always Adventure Time, somewhere in the multiverse. It is always the moment before the wish and the moment after. It is always the light on Simon's face when Marcy finally laughs. It is always Jake at the door of the 50th Dead World, deciding at the last second to follow his brother. The screens in the time room show all of it, every moment, every universe. And somewhere in that infinite display, right now, two friends are sitting together in a treehouse, not yet knowing what is coming, just being here in the only moment that has ever actually existed. If you made it all the way to the end of this one, you are exactly the kind of person this channel is built for. Thank you for spending these hours with me in one of the most quietly extraordinary mythologies ever built for a cartoon. If you enjoyed this deep dive, a like goes a long way. And if you have not subscribed yet, there are so many more nights like this one waiting for you. Drop a comment with your favorite piece of lore from tonight, or the thing that surprised you most, or just let me know where you are in the world and what time it is there. I read every single one. Sleep well wherever you are, in this universe or any of the others.